Before I start, let me give you a description of where I live. It's a small town about 6 miles love both ways. It's mostly desert, mostly friendly people with a few sour apples. One day, me and my friends, let's call them Tony and Mark, were hanging outside my house. My house is like maybe 70 feet away from a super Walmart that's being worked on. So my friends were staying the night at my house because my parents were out of town for the weekend. At this point, we played just about every video game I have. We were bored out of our minds, so Tony, the youngest and smallest in the group, aged 15, with me and Mark at 17, said, "We should go to the super Walmart and explore it." Me and Mark don't like breaking the law, or anything along the lines of getting in trouble, but we went along with Tony. It took us about 10 minutes to get ready and leave. We found an opening in the gate and went through. The start of the exploring seemed normal for a work-in-progress building, but we noticed that there was a way to get into the basement. I was getting weird vibes from the door saying we shouldn't go in there. I turned around to walk away from it when Mark stopped me and asked me, "Are you getting a creeped out vibe from this basement too?" I just nodded and tried to leave again when Mark stopped me again. "We have to go down there to make sure nothing bad's going on," he told me. "This is a code V." Me and Mark had a code rule for different situations. V was the worst of them all. I turned around and started to head towards the door when me and Mark noticed the door was open and Tony was missing. We looked at each other and rushed into the basement to find him. As we got down there, red flags lit up for me right away. It was mildly damp, and the lights on the wall were making the place brighter than outside. It looked rather big down there. I looked around till I noticed Tony on the ground. I ran over to him and checked him. When I got by him, I noticed the pipe on the ground nearby. I started to shake him, saying, "Wake up, moron!" Still shaking him when I heard Mark's voice yell over to me to look over at him. When I did, I couldn't believe what I saw. 2 guys in bloody shirts and black pants. The one on the left spoke first. "What are you brats doing in our basement?" he said in a growl-like voice. At this time, Tony started to wake back up. I got up, grabbing the metal pipe, hiding it behind my back, and I spoke up. "Oh, sorry about that. We thought we heard something down here. Don't mind us, we'll just be leaving," I said as I helped Tony up and started heading towards the stairs. "You're not going anywhere," the one on the right shouted and started advancing towards us. I pushed Tony over to Mark because he was stronger than me, and then I rushed up the stairs. I swung the metal pipe at the guy's knee, hitting it, and then I booked it with the pipe. When I got up there, Mark slammed the door shut, and I slipped the pipe through the handles, locking it. I wish I could say that was the end. We chose not to go home just in case we were being followed, and sadly we were by the other guy. This was our 5th lap around my house, not going in yet. Just now noticing him, I told them, "Don't freak out, but that guy is about 50 feet behind us, trying to stay hidden. Turn left here and head to my brother's house, he'll know what to do." As I said this, I noticed he was speeding up some, so I tapped their shoulders to book it. As we were running, I heard him behind us, also sprinting, but he was losing speed. We were more than 80 feet away now. We got home to my brother's house and told him what had happened. He told us, "Stay put, I will grab my gun and scare them off." So we grabbed his pistol and walked outside. About 2 minutes later, we heard 2 gunshots and my brother walked back in and said, "Call the cops now, I got one in the leg, he's trying to limp away." After I called the cops, they came and got one of the 2 guys and questioned us about what happened and if we knew them. After the cops left, we stayed at my brother's house for the night, not going to sleep till about 6 when the sun rose. So from what I heard, they both got caught. Turns out they had kidnapped and killed somebody in that basement. If I was not quick to act, me and my friends could have died that night. Now, if you're wondering why I remember so much, it's because this only happened 3 weeks ago. So, creepy guys in the basement of the super Walmart, let's hope we never meet again. This all happened when I was 13. Things weren't great at home and I drifted into the habit of going out very late most nights and just walking aimlessly around, exploring the pretty dull town in which I grew up. My parents went to bed early since they had actual responsibilities, so it was pretty easy to say I was going to watch TV at a friend's house and stay out till the small hours, creeping into bed well after midnight. There was a girl in my class called Janet, who I don't think had ever even noticed me previously. She was stunningly attractive and witty and warm and, well, generally perfect. As I was very much invisible to girls, invisible to most people in fact, don't ask me how this came about as I'm unsure myself, but we began to meet up on some of the nocturnal excursions. Though we were never more than friends, I guess she must have been a fellow night owl, or maybe she was just bored like I was. I had no idea how to talk to girls, but I must have done something right as somehow she seemed to like me. though I'm hardly what you call a ladies' man. I'm sure as how I liked her though. We got into a routine whereby she would slip me a note in school with something written on it like, meet me at the shops at 9 o'clock, and we'd hang around in the dark and talk about dumplings. It was the sort of town where everything would shut down at night, and so we had the roads, parks and cemeteries to ourselves. She would show me where she grew up, and I would tell her about local ghosts and legends that I'd half invented myself. We usually gravitated towards our school, which is surrounded by a 7-foot chain link fence, like a concentration camp, but in those days anyone could wander around the paths and grounds. There was a big plain filled in forest at the rear, benches and bike sheds if we needed rest or shelter. We were still just about young enough that we didn't need cigarettes or alcohol to have a good time. So one night we had arranged to meet up as normal, and I stood over the road from the corner shop that was the only place in town still open this late, sort of watching from the shadows as sometimes one of the staff would see me and storm outside and tell me to get lost. But Janet never showed, which was the first time. I gave her another hour and left pretty hurt and angry, which in hindsight was a bit of an overreaction, as in all probability she wanted to come meet me, but maybe her parents had stopped her, or something came up. Neither of us could afford mobile phones, which was still for the rich kids back then. I couldn't hang around waiting any longer, anyways, as it was October and it was cold enough that even an indestructible teen like me could feel the chill. I wandered aimlessly until about midnight, where I wound up sat on an old bench overlooking our school at the top of some long graduating steps which led down to one of several entrances to the sprawling school structure. I was miserable and dejected and couldn't see my own breath. Like an idiot, I was always underdressed for the cold British weather, with only a thin sport jacket over my t-shirt. I was one of those kids who never needed much of a shove to skulk and strop, so I sat there shivering and felt sorry for myself. Thoughts flashed through my head of suicide and self-harm, until I noticed there was a light on at the bottom of the steps, which, strangely, I hadn't noticed earlier. A dim light shone through a small window in a door, which led to the science block. This was bizarre. No one should have been inside the school at this hour. I sometimes stayed late with a detention, even a couple of hours after the students had left for the day. There were no cleaners or teachers left around. The place was eerily deserted and as quiet as the grave. I decided to go and have a closer look. I don't think I would have done this if I wasn't in such a lousy mood. I guess I figured the evening couldn't get any worse. So I made my way down the steps to a pale yellow glow which seemed comforting, like a sanctuary from everything that was wrong in the world. My curiosity was off the scale too. Maybe there's something exciting going on, like a robbery in progress, or some kids who had broken in looking for someplace warm to get high. The door to the school wasn't locked, and I saw the light coming from another room leading to a room beneath the stairs, which I had never really noticed before. So I cautiously entered into a nurse's station of sorts, a small room with a couple of old battered school chairs and a mirror on the wall over the sink. It was stiflingly warm inside, though I saw no radiators and heard no heaters. There was a couple of ancient yellow posters on the wall about not passing on flu germs or something similar. Just as I was about to announce my presence, a lady appeared in a small alcove and asked how she could help. I told her I'd seen a light and followed my feet. I realised my thoughts of death and dismemberment were draining, and felt too foolish to tell her such a thing. She had a manner about her which screamed that she only gave love in the tough variety, so I said I wasn't sure what I wanted and politely inquired about her presence. She told me she was always there at night as a crisis nurse, without going into specifics, and I was way too shy to ask any more questions. It was a small town, and the school also acted as kind of a community centre too, serving as a voting station and a blood donation centre, that sort of thing, so to my naive 13-year-old mind, the story sort of checked out. She was tiny, literally 4 feet tall, and dressed like someone from the Salvation Army, with a khaki shirt and shorts on, old-fashioned sandals, and a dark crimson sash around her stocky chest. I never once saw her smile, but didn't really see this as strange or unfriendly until I thought about it later, also reflecting on how her language was cold for a nurse. They always called you love or dear, asking nice friendly questions and seeming to want to talk, enjoy it even. Her attitude was formal and businesslike. There was an awkward silence before she suggested that I must have known how I'd arrived there. So I said, I guess I lacked direction, which was a stupid thing to say, but it seemed appropriate somehow. She said she was part of a team, who people could turn to when they felt alone or undervalued. Showing no emotion, she began to speak of pills that could help. I mumbled some sort of vague agreement, a little bewildered as I knew nothing really of medication back then, and she disappeared back around the corner from where she emerged. I could hear cupboards and drawers opening and tablets rattling in plastic jars. She told me she had just the thing to make me feel better, and spoke of doses and such like. But while she was talking in her low, soft and slightly gravelly voice, I began to pay attention to my growing sense of dread. It dawned on me that I did not like this woman at all. Something was very wrong with this entire situation. Worse, I sensed I was in real danger there and that I had to leave immediately. So while she was in the back rummaging and muttering, I slipped straight out the door and hurried home to bed, not looking back once. I have no more memories of that night. When I awoke that morning, the whole thing seemed unreal, with my recollection rapidly disintegrating, details vague like in my dreams. I probably would have dismissed the whole thing as some bad nightmare if it were not for the breaking news at school that morning. Janet had vanished into the night. She had gone out to meet someone and never returned. Everyone was talking about it. The speculation was predictably ridiculous, a smorgasbord of half-baked theories and vindictive gossip. They held an emergency assembly for everyone in our year, with a police officer stood at the side of the stage urging us to come forward if we knew or heard anything even vaguely strange or suspicious. Afterwards, officers spoke privately to some of Janet's closest friends. She had quite a few. She was always very well liked. Of course, they didn't bother speaking to me, as no one had a clue about our late-night rendezvous. In fact, no one even knew I existed. I did wonder if anyone would even believe me if I came forward to say that I had been meeting with Janet. I probably would have been dismissed as an attention seeker, or maybe they'd have seen me as a prime suspect. Weird, shambling misanthrope meets popular pretty girl. The thought did cross my mind, and how could I have told anybody about what happened to me that very same night? They'd have pegged me as insane and thrown me to the wolves, one way or another. Strangely enough, Janet was very rarely mentioned by anyone again afterwards. No anniversaries were marked. Her friends quickly began talking about other things. A couple of weeks and everything was back to normal. Except, about a year later, one of the teachers took down small posters, and beneath one of them was a bright scribble in permanent marker about Janet, some stupid insult. The teacher froze for a moment, then remarked quietly to herself how she couldn't even remember Janet's surname. Then she dismissed the whole thing and carried on with her day. I turned around to look back at the rest of the class, but no one else was even listening. That was the last time I heard anyone say her name. She had seemingly ceased to exist, which is strange to say the least. The police seemed to drop the case pretty soon, and internet searches throw up no records of her at all. I've no way of knowing if she got mixed up with that weird old woman I encountered that night. But the whole thing seems just too bizarre to be coincidental. But for all I know, Janet ran away and joined the circus. It is maddeningly vague. I did discreetly ask the school if they ran some sort of late-night therapy program for troubled teens, but you can probably guess the answer. I really should have gone and said something to Janet's parents, as I considered myself at least partly responsible for her disappearance. I was far too mature and awkward to have ever confronted them. What a total wimp. Now, this is the end of my story. The end of Janet, I guess. I have since moved to a new town, but sometimes I return to revisit the places where me and Janet would go on those few fleeting late summer nights. The school is still stood there. It's been pretty heavily developed in recent years. Every part seems to be totally different, except for those long, graduating steps down to the old science block. I walk past every once in a while, and I stand above those steps and stare down at the school, and I still wonder what the hell happened.